welcome to this week's edition of Thursday with Jamila. For those of us who are listening via the radio, online, good evening. For those of you who are tuning in via Facebook Live, good evening. I'm so happy to be on tonight. I'm excited. I want to talk about the called life, but listen, I want to take you guys back, and I want everybody to listen to the song very carefully. Like you gotta be like a old school gospel music lover to remember the song. Okay, so are y'all ready? Okay, listen. I want to make sure y'all ready. Okay, hold on. Let's make sure everybody ready. Who remembers this jam? For the sake. Hey. Of the call, I am laying down my all. No turning back. Y'all remember this? I'm moving straight ahead. I'm on the right track. And it's all for the sake of the call. Do y'all remember that? Like, do y'all remember that song? I remember when Anointed came out and everybody was on the Anointed kick, and that song, me and my mom used to wear that song out. Now, as a kid, I didn't really get it, right? I'm like, oh, the call, oh, for the sake of the call. And I mean, we just sing the song, for the sake of the call. But are you listening to the words? I am laying down my all. Really? No turning back. I'm moving straight ahead. I'm on the right track. And it's all for the sake of the call. Now, Anointed might have been on to something when they recorded the song, and I was just singing along as a little kid, really not paying attention to the words or what it meant or anything of the sort, and I'm just jamming out, right? I'm laying it all down for the sake of the call. I wish I would have realized how powerful my words were as a young girl, and that your words bring life or death. And I was speaking and singing about something that I really didn't understand as a little kid. And although I may have been young in age, I think that this is something that some of us often do. I want to be called, I want to be called, I want to walk in my calling. And we're so excited about the call, right? But do we really take into account all that comes with the acceptance or the response to the call? And that's what I want to talk about tonight. And so I want to touch on what it is to be called, what the calling is, and then I just kind of want to walk through that this evening because I think there's been an awakening that has taken place. So many people are coming into the knowledge and the understanding of who they are or who they feel a pull to become, but they may not have all the how-tos and they may not know the proper responses, but they feel like there's something upon them or something being pressed upon them to be more than what they are, and they want to respond to it, but they don't really know how to. And we can just jam out to that song, I'm laying it all down for the sake of the call. But how many of us really would do that if we knew what we'd have to lay down and what we'd have to walk through for the sake of the call? How many of us would really volunteer to do that? And so tonight, I just want to spend some time walking through that. And when we talk about the call in biblical terminology, and we're looking at how we call on the Lord, one of the main components that is often referenced is worship, right? And when we worship, it's simply meaning that we're uttering the name of God. Like we're ascribing to Him, we're calling Him, we're beckoning for His presence. And so we're calling upon Him. But when we broaden it a bit, the calling on the Lord can also include prayer. And when we're in prayer, we are having a conversation with God, right? We are reminding Him of His word. We're putting our heart before Him. We're pouring out before Him. We're doing all the things. And in that, if you've been around me even a little bit of time, you'll always hear me say that God responds to the name that you call him, right? And so when we don't know him as something, it's kind of hard for us to refer to him as that. So we may not call him as that, but when we have a specific need and we know the name associated with the need, we call him that and he responds to his name, right? And so there's power in understanding the names of God and diversifying our understanding and our speech when it comes to how we ascribe him, because he will show up in the person that you know him and believe him to be, but you've got to be able to what? Call his name, right? And so that's one piece when we talk about the call to life. God is going to respond to the call when we do it. Another piece of the call is the election process, and this is the part where there's a naming. And so in biblical term, it says that when we name something, we bestow an identity upon it. And so this is why it is imperative that we name our children names that we want them to be responded, or we want them to respond to, or we only respond to our name, because we can be called a lot of things. Labels can be placed upon us, and when they put those names on us, we bestow that identity. But I only want to respond to that which is a direct reflection of who I'm called and purposed to be. So I'm not going to respond to everything, but I will always respond to my name. And there's a couple episodes back where I talk about my name and what it means, and how God gave me even a deeper revelation in studying my name and talking about the gate of beautiful, where the man had laid there at the gate of beautiful, and he just expounded on what that was to me. And so some people will say, I find that hard to believe that you have an esteem problem. Well, it's something that I've had to work through, but I'm grateful that every time that my name is called, it describes my identity. It reminds me of who God said I am. He said I was fearfully and wonderfully made. My name means Jamila, and lovely and beautiful and meek and lowly, and there's a lot that comes with it. And so in the naming, in the election process, when we bestow an identity upon a thing, it becomes what it is named, or what it is identified as. So I need you to keep that in mind, because the name is going to encapsulate a message about who you are. Your name encapsulates the purpose and the message of who you are. So when it is called, everything associated with your story comes forth. I want you to keep that in mind as we walk through this. And then when God bestows a name on a thing, it is considered to be the equivalent of a creation, of calling something into creation. And so when he created the things, he created and called them one by one. And if you need a scripture reference to that, you can find that in Isaiah 40 and 26. And it says, who created all these? Who brings out of the starry host one by one and calls them each by name? Because his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. And so I love that, because he doesn't run out of names. He can bestow an identity upon all things. And when he does that, we have to respond to the call, because the call is attached to your identity. So this is the part of the naming process that's going to be specific to God. So what do you call him? What do you know him to be? Are you going to rock out to that song and say, for the sake of the call, I'm laying it all down? Is that going to be your truth? Are you going to do that willingly? Are you going to do it with grace? Are you going to do it with humility? Are you going to do it with a willing spirit? Or when you're called, are you going to be resistant or reluctant to responding because of what you have to give up in order to walk in the truth or the fullness of who you've been predestined to be? See, I hear it often in sectors, and people are like, yeah, I want to be called. I want to walk in this. I want to do all these things. And I will never discourage you from that. I will ask that you attain the knowledge associated with the call. You've got to become familiar with the prerequisites and the requirements to walk fully in that call. Because if you don't know where you're walking into, you will be blindsided, and you may feel overwhelmed, and then all of a sudden feel like you're no longer qualified because you didn't count up the cost. So you've got to count up the cost to walk in the call. Okay? So I want to go into you as an individual being called of the Lord. And when you are called of the Lord, there's an initiation process that happens. And I hate to tell you this, but that initiation process happened long before you even got here, and it doesn't warrant your opinion because it already is. And that may seem harsh. That may seem harsh. You're probably like, dang, Jamila, did you really have to say that like that? Yes, because what I want you to know is who you've been called to be is who you shall be. And you don't get to derail that. You may take a longer time walking into it, but you will eventually become that which you've been called and predestined to be because that's why you were placed on earth. So, in order to enjoy and walk fully on that and have a long and prosperous journey in the call, it starts with the surrender. And we've got to surrender to the initiation process that has already taken place. And in that, we can go to Romans 8 and 29. And it says, those whom he foreknew and loved and chose beforehand, he also predestined to be confirmed to the image of his Son and ultimately share in his complete sanctification, so that he would be the firstborn, most beloved, and honored among many believers. So this initiation process happened before you got here. Well, how can I attest to that? To foreknew something means it's God's knowledge of an entire course of events which are future from a human stance. So God has full knowledge of the entire course of events, which to us looks like a future thing, a far off thing from where we stand, because we're not all knowing, we're not God. So God foreknew you. And in foreknowing you, he predestined you. What does it mean to be predestined? To be predestined is the doctrine that God, in consequence of this foreknowledge of all events, infallibly guides those who are destined for salvation. So let me walk that back. So when we go back to Romans 8 and 29, it says, for those he foreknew and loved and chose beforehand, he also predestined. So for those that he foreknew, meaning those he knew the entire sequence of events before your arrival, he loved and he chose. And then he also predestined, meaning that all of the consequences associated with his foreknowledge, he is guiding you to sanctification because you were destined for that. So there's something that I want us to understand, because we feel like, well, we can't be called, or we can't be the elect of God because we're not put together, or we don't have the era of what it would require or be accepted by many when it comes to those who are the called or the elect of God. But God knows it all the details, all the mishaps, all the bumps in the road, everything that's not going to go according to what we consider to be the plan. And he still says, I foreknew you, I predestined you, and this is the way in which you will walk. Okay? And then he goes on to Romans 8 and 30. And I love this part because it says, and for those he predestined, he also called. So for those who he already had a guide laid out for, he called you. And for those he called, he justified, declared free of guilt of sin. Declared free of the guilt of sin. And those he justified, he also glorified, raising them to a heavenly dignity. I really want you to sit in that for a minute and think about that. So I am the called of God, meaning he foreknew me, he predestined me, and then he called me. So before the call even happened, he foreknew me, meaning he mapped and scripted out every single detail associated with my being. He knew it all. It's coming to me in what looks to be a future thing, but he's already lived it, walked through it, dotted every I, crossed every T. Then he predestined me. So he foreknew it, he laid it out. Now he's guided me in the way that I should go, all before the call even happens. How amazing is that? That all of the details are already worked out, walked through, even before the call happens. And I'm saying that as a sign of encouragement to somebody who says, well, maybe I'm not called, or maybe I don't want to subscribe to that. But when you subscribe, please understand that the foundation has already been laid on your behalf. Now all you have to do is respond to what's already going to work out in your favor. The call is the identity. You respond to your name. Your name declares your purpose. I love that about God. He's so amazing and he's so awesome in all that he does. There's no finite detail of our lives that is coming to him by surprise because he is the one who foreknew and therefore predestined. And I love that about God. And so hear me when I say this. Contrary. Okay, so I'm doing that today. That's always fun. Contrary to to what the present circumstances may look like, I want you to always remember that God foreknew, predestined, called, justified, and glorified you. And what he ordered cannot be altered. What God ordered cannot be altered. And I think that I'm safe in saying that the reason why many of us stray away from responding to the call because we feel like in our humanity we're going to fail miserably or we're going to miss the mark and therefore we're going to disqualify the call completely. And let me take some load off of your shoulders and let you know you're not that grand. You can't alter the plan of God. You can walk in the call and be receptive and submissive to the call. But what he said shall be, it shall not be otherwise. And I love that about God because there's an assurance built in to the call. You're guarded and graced to be exactly what he's calling you to because that is your identity. And that's the beautiful thing about it, right? But then there are some people that say, well, you know what? I don't I don't actually want to do that. I don't want to yield my entire being because when I accept the call it becomes all of who I am, and I don't want to do that because I've grown accustomed to who I am, and to respond to the call means I have to subscribe to being something different. And I hear you and I understand. I get it wholeheartedly because from a little girl, I have been told that I am called, and the callings that are over my life have been professed over me since I was a little girl. And the reason why I never wanted to walk into it, because my grandma would always tell me the life of that which you are called to is a lonely one. And you're going to have to get comfortable with that because God's going to pull you away a lot, and you're going to be isolated a lot, and you're going to find yourself wanting to be in the company or in camaraderie with others, and God's going to pull you away because of the call that's on your life. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to be a part of something that's going to cause me to have to live in solidarity. I don't actually want to do that. I'd rather be in the company of people because, I mean, what kid wants to hear that your life is going to require you to have to walk alone many a days? I don't want to do that. I get it. And as an adult, sometimes still don't understand why there's always this pull, and sometimes I can't seem to engage or indulge in some of the other things that I would personally maybe want to. But when you accept the call, when you respond, when your name is called, there is a command and a charge and a standard that you have to come up to. And it's not all roses and sunny days. But had I not responded to my call, my purpose would be left undone. And I'd rather respond to the call and have a purpose well lived than have a purpose that's lying dormant because of my disobedience. Okay? So even though it's going to cost you something, what you gain on the back end of your sacrifice is always well worth it, because what you're purposed to do always brings a level of satisfaction. It brings a level of accomplishment that walking outside of the call will never yield you. Okay? So listen, when we're talking about responding to the call, there's a naming. Okay? And to be called of God means that you have to be called something different. So back to that identity that you've grown accustomed to, that you like, you enjoy. But when you've been called of God, you're going to be called something different. And you've got to be prepared for that. And when you're called something different, you are required to answer. So are we prepared to answer when our name is called? Are we prepared to do that? And then it says, the new names, the Son of the living God is given to those who God has called, both Jews and Gentiles. Okay? So you are given a new name when you are the called. And that's a beautiful thing, because I don't have to be named by my past. I don't have to be named by my hiccups, but now I get to be named by my purpose. And how beautiful is that? Because I technically, from the outside looking in wouldn't qualify to be called anything other than what people are familiar with. But I'm thankful that he would rename me and name me a name that's attached to my purpose, and then he's guided me in the way of that. That's a beautiful thing. And then when you receive that new name, you take on a new shape. Why are we taking on a new shape? Because we're taking on a new identity. We're taking on the purpose. And so to be clothed in purpose means that we can no longer be clothed in what was. We've got to lay down the old garments and clothe ourselves in the purpose so that we can walk boldly and live a wholesome and full life in God. And that is what matters. And that's what's amazing. And I would rather wear the garment of purpose than to continue to wander as a wayward child, because I don't want to surrender to that which I've been called to. So the naming, I'll respond to my name. And why will I respond to my name? Because destiny is attached to my name. And the moment where we are called points us toward the final goal. So now that I'm responding to my name, destiny is being made manifest, and I am pointed in the way of the goal. So I'm no longer off track, and I'm no longer wandering, but now I'm in destiny mode, and I'm headed and facing and in line and right position to reach the goal. Isn't that what our purpose is? To reach the goal? We want to reach the goal, right? In order to reach the goal, we've got to respond to the call and then submit to destiny and where it leads. This is the one that can sometimes be somewhat of a challenge. And I get it. People say, oh, it's a millennial era. I don't think it's the millennials, actually. I think it's all people, because everybody has a different definition of what holiness is. And so here's what I want us to consider when we're talking about the holiness aspect of it. And in holiness is that we would constantly pray that we may be counted worthy of his calling. Okay? Do we get that? So let's think about that. So what does that mean, Jamila? Give me some tidbits on what does that actually look like? Okay? So, holiness, that we could be counted worthy of his calling. Do I know what that looks like? Am I familiar with what that could consist of? What does that look like, to be counted worthy of his calling? Well, in Leviticus, it says that we shall be holy because God's holy, right? So if we're going to be counted worthy, we've got to be holy, for the Lord God is holy, and in his sovereignty, he separated us that we would be called his. So in walking in holiness and surrendering and be counted worthy of his call, we've got to be a separated people. And so when we decide that we're going to respond to the call, we're going to do what we are commissioned to do, we have to be okay with being a separated group. You can't lead the crowd that you're amongst. The leader has to step aside, right? You've been called to be the influencer, not the influence. So at some point, you've got to be okay with the fact that you're going to be a separated person, okay? Then we've got to walk worthily. In Ephesians 4, verses 1 through 3, it says, I, therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. How do we walk worthily? We've got to walk in humility and gentleness with patience. Furthermore, we've got to bear one another in love. How do we be holy? So some people think that holy is a dress code, or holy is no makeup, or holy is never cutting your hair. And all of those are traditional things, and I don't judge people for any of that. Like if that's how you ascribe and that's what you're comfortable with, totally fine. But when it says that we're to be holy, it's telling us that we have got to walk worthily in all humility. What is your humility like? You can speak in tongues to me until you're blue in the face, but if you're not humble, you're boastful, you're very prideful. Everything about you has this aura that is a deterrent. Can I still render you holy? What does your gentleness look like? Are you very sharp at the mouth? What does that look like? Do you know how to draw people in love? Do you know how to make sure that people are drawn with loving kindness instead of a judgmental spirit? Are we doing that? What does that look like for some of us? I don't know, because I think sometimes we're so caught up in what we expect for life to look like when it comes to holiness as a garment or as an external thing that we forget that there are some characteristics that we're supposed to be taking on as Christians. So, in humility, in gentleness, and with patience, we've got to bear love for one another, you guys. We've got to be bearing one another in love in this thing. When we accept the call, we realize that it is extended beyond just us, right? And what about the vocation? And the vocation is the notion of an appointment to office, okay? And so with that, we have to understand that when you're appointed to an office, that is your vocation. That is what you are called to do. That is the charge that you are commissioned to lead. That's the thing that God needs for you to be in the earth realm, right? In your vocation. And so some of us, sometimes, I've heard some people have some mixed reviews about marketplace ministry, right? I've heard some people say that they feel like it's a scam. They feel like, it's just another get-rich scheme. There's no such thing as marketplace ministry. Like, I've heard it all, right? But if God has called you to a particular vocation, wherever you are, you should be a representation of your purpose, right? So there's never this time where we just decide to not be all that God has commissioned us to be because it's at work. Now, I work in HR. I'm never going to tell you to just walk and show up at work and decide that you just going to sidestep policies and you're going to start speaking in tongues and doing all the things at work. Okay, well, that might not be the most appropriate thing to do at work, right? We've probably got to mind the fact that we're at work, right? So we can't just be out here, representing God in a way that makes us look foolish, because that's not what the will is for our lives either, right? But in that, we have got to decide that we're going to, in all that we do for God, we're going to render ourselves wholly to the situation. So in your vocation, that has purpose into it. And I want to say this, whatever gifts are being exercised as a result to the call, it's not always just about ordained ministry. I think some of us have strayed away from doing what we were called to do because, well, they haven't given me an official title and they haven't ordained me, or whatever the circumstances are. So we stray away from walking fully in who we're called and commissioned to be because we don't necessarily have a title. But your vocation is your gift. What are your giftings, and are you exercising and walking in those things? Or are we just deciding that, well, because they won't give me an official title, because they won't refer to me as this, I'm going to not be responsive to the call? That is not okay. It's not okay, and it's a cop-out. It's a way of saying that I'm going to not do my part because they won't call me what I feel I should be called. And I'm convicted in that. So let me not just act like this is a harp on anybody outside of myself. There have been times where I was just like, well, I'm not called that, so I'm not going to respond to the assignment. And I was convicted because at the end of the day, if I'm going back to Romans, it said who he predestined, he called. And those he called, he justified. And those he justified, he glorified. He being God. So just because people don't call you by what you feel you should be called does not negate the fact that God has. And if God has called you something, he is expecting a response. He is expecting for you to deliver on that which he has justified, predestined, ordained, glorified, all the things you for. But you've got it. You've got to decide. You've got to make the decision. And I'm not going to say that walking in the call is easy. I'm not going to say that walking in the call is glamorous. There are some days I will look up and I say, I did I actually say I want to do this? Because I don't remember saying that, yes, I'm yielded fully to this and this is what I want to do. Because of the weight and because of all that comes with it. Like everybody, I won't say everybody, that's not correct. There are a lot of people who just make the assumption that the called people or the elect people of God have it easy. And that could be further from the truth. There are people who sometimes regret the day that they responded and accepted the call in their life, because now everything about their life has shifted. Everything that they were once comfortable and familiar with is no longer in place. They've had to create new normals. They've had to, you know what I mean? They've had to disassociate from some things. They've had to live a separated and consecrated life. And I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but sometimes having to live a separated and consecrated life is incredibly challenging. It's lonely. Have you ever really sat and talked to a prophet? See, everybody runs to the prophet when they need a word, but how many people are asking the prophet, what is your life really like? What is it like to have to be separated and live a fully consecrated life before God? Like, what does that look like for you? We don't ask them that part. We call them by their name because of the benefit that they bring to us, but we don't inquire of them about what it is costing them to be that. We don't ask that question because we're benefiting from it. So the next time you're called, even though it's going to cost you something, I would admonish you to respond, because your purpose is there, your vocation is there, your naming is there. Everything that you are designed to be is wrapped up in it. And no, it's not easy. And no, sometimes we don't want to do it. And no, it can be a headache of headaches, but that's what you're here for. And please note that every call doesn't have a pulpit or a platform or a following. It doesn't all come that. Like, it doesn't all come with that. So sometimes it's just not going to be that for you. Sometimes it's going to be, I've got to sit in the back. I've got to do something different. I've got to, like, it's not working. It's not working. And so now we're sitting here. Okay, I'm hearing on Facebook that they cannot hear me, you guys. It's been an interesting day with technology. Not sure what's happening. Hopefully they're picking it up. If not, we will definitely make sure that we upload this on YouTube for you guys. So we've got to figure out, what does this look like for me? And how do I walk fully in who God has called me to be? And how do I decide that the call is worth the sacrifice? I think that is one of the hardest questions to answer, is how do I decide that responding to the call is worth my sacrifice? And let me tell you, you won't know until you get into it. You won't, because God is not going to decide that you are worthy of the full depiction of what he's called you to for you to say, okay, I'm going to do it. No, because then you don't have to have faith. And no, then you don't have to trust in his sovereign will for your life. You're making a man decision on something that is spiritual. And so that is one of the things that you're not going to be afforded. So you're not going to be able to go to God and say, so before I say yes to this thing you're calling me to, can you map out all the things that I'm going to have to give up? Can you tell me kind of what that's going to look like? Don't expect it. Don't expect it, because that's not going to happen. That's not what he's going to give you. What he is going to give you is what you need along the way. And you've got to build trust in him. And that is why there's a part of being separated, because when you've yielded so much onto what's familiar, sometimes you stop depending on the one who has rendered you worthy of the call. And so now he's got to pull you out of everything that you've started to make little idols out of, so that he can pull you back into fellowship and consecration with him. And that is not fun either, but it's necessary. It's necessary so that he can continue to make you what you are ultimately purposed to be. And that pruning and that proving and that qualifying is all a part of your process. It's all a part of your process, and it's so worth it. It's so incredibly worth it. And I'm saying that going through yet another process. And there are moments I look up to God and I'm like, okay, so what is happening? Like, I have conversations with God like that. I'll just be like, so I don't quite understand why this is the thing that we're doing today. I'm gonna trust you, but I am gonna be honest with you and tell you that I have my concerns. And somebody might say you can't approach God like that, Jamila. That's disrespectful. And to each their own. But that's how I communicate with God, because there are moments where it seems like I was fully submitted, or so I thought, and I was walking in the way that He ordained for me to walk, and then here comes another blind side. And now I'm sitting here trying to figure out, okay, whoa, what is happening? Did I misstep? Did I do something in error? Am I not walking the set path? Have I sinned unknowingly? Have I missed the mark? I'll ask those questions. And what I am also learning in this is sometimes it's not about what you didn't do, but it's because of your diligence that there's a greater testing, because now I get to graduate you to the next thing. You accepted this level of the call, and now I'm graduating you to the next thing, which is going to gain you greater exposure. So I still got to make sure that you're walking in what? Humility and gentleness with patience, because the next level of testing is going to come, and I don't want you to get out of character, and I don't want you to morph into something that you're not, because the circumstance has pulled you out of your name. The circumstance would have you be named something different, and I don't want you to be renamed. What I want you to do is to stay in this, because I've qualified you for this. I have predestined you for this, and although you feel like this is more than you can bear, you got this. Because He foreknew it. So everything that you need to get through it is built in the journey. Huh? I'm getting excited thinking about it, because I've had a moment and I'm just like, what in the heck is happening? What is going on? But I just heard it, and it makes sense. Everything that you need is built in the process. In His foresight, He put every single thing that you need. It's all built into the journey. But you've got to surrender and walk in the way that He's called you, so that you can be the benefactor of those things. It's just part of the process, y'all. It's just part of the process. So no, He's not going to tell you everything that you've got to give up for you to make the decision. You've got to do that on your own. You've got to trust that He's God enough to surrender. You've got to trust that. You've got to decide He is God enough for me to just say yes. All by itself. He's got enough for me to just say yes. So I'm going to just say yes. And I'm going to trust that in His foresight. Because what is the definition? Let me go back and tell you. Because we've had some technical difficulties on Facebook. So some people might have missed the definition. So for those online, I want to read it to you again. When He foreknew something, it's God's knowledge of the entire course of events, which are future from the human point of view. Does that make sense? So God's knowledge of the entire thing. You want Him to give you the tidbits? He's like, nope, because I got knowledge of the entire thing. And you're looking at it from what looks like it's a future thing to you. Meanwhile, I know the end from the beginning from the end, and I've walked it through detail by detail. So I got you. I just need your yes. I just need your yes, because I've got it all taken care of. And why? Because in my foreknowledge, I am guiding you along the way. He's the best tour guide out there. He's the best tour guide out there, y'all. So are we going to surrender? Are we still going to walk around anxious because we don't know what we've got to give up when we say, I'm going to live the called life? When we say, I'm going to surrender fully to His leading? When we say that He's worth my surrender? When we say, are we going to do it? Are we going to do it? Are we going to keep living beneath what the call will yield? I'm always, what is the word I want to use? I'm always intrigued by the people that I see who walk in boldness of their call. It's like they are fearless and they just go after it. And I'm like, I could never do that. I could never do that. Like, I need help. I need somebody to guide me along the way. And I've used that excuse to the point to where God has pulled all of my crutches away from me. And I'm in a season where he's like, no, I'm not going to let you use the crutch because those are the excuses. Because the same admiration you have for somebody else who walks boldly in their call is what you are fully capable of doing. But you've got to have your total dependency on the supplier. You've got to have your total dependency on me. You have your dependency on things that can fail you. I never will. And so when we say yes to the call, it is the complete yielding and reliance on God himself. Because he's the one who called you. He's the one that's mapped it out for you. And I was sitting and I was talking to somebody even before this podcast. And I was reminded of the story in Jeremiah where they talk about the potter and the clay. And the writer goes on to say, the clay never looks back to the potter and says, what are you making of me and why? But the clay is yielded to the molding process of whatever the potter is getting ready to create. And when the potter creates the thing, he names the thing, and the thing functions in the capacity of that which it has been named. And so possibly we may need to become clay again so that we can get back on the potter's wheel, so that we can be molded and sculpted into the thing that he has already called us to be, so that he can name us that thing, and then we can submit fully to what we've been named to and operate in that capacity. Are you willing to let him change your name? Yeah, I get it. You've been this person your whole life, but are you willing to let him change your name? Yeah, I know all of your career connections are associated with that name, and everybody knows you as such, and they revere you as such, but are you willing to let him change your name? Yeah, I get it. They know you to be this, and they like you as this, and they pay you to be this, and your revenue and resources are attached to that identity, but are you willing to let him change your name? Moses had to walk into a completely new identity at 40. 40 years old. What do you mean? I got to be something completely different. I'm 40 years old. This is the life I know. This is the life I've cultivated. This is the life that I'm accustomed to. And you want me to be something different? What? I get it. But look at who Moses became as a result of responding to the call. Maybe, just maybe, all the things that you've been in wait for are on the other side of your submission and your obedience. Just maybe. Could just fantasy me that. Just possibly, could it be that in the name change and the garment, when you decide to robe up in that identity, everything will align properly because now you got on the right apparel, you're in the right environment, and you're responding to the right name? Just maybe. I don't know. I'm just crazy enough to believe that there's so much attached to the call when we respond. It's like a mom is going to call that child until that child responds. And that child is ultimately going to respond to their name. If their name is Billy, they're not going to respond to John, right? And if I think about some of my favorite characters in the Bible and some of those monumental shifts that happen, majority of them are attached to the renaming of those individuals. Abram became Abraham, Sarai, Sarah. I love that story. It's not that their former names were bad, actually. There was some positivity attached to them. But the name change yielded a greater reward. And although you've been known as such, you've walked as such, and you've seen some benefits of that identity, the name that you are called that is attached to your purpose yields such a greater harvest. But but you've got to be willing to walk in it. And yeah, you're going to have to sacrifice some stuff. And yes, it's going to feel lonely sometimes. And yes, you're going to be called to be holy. You're going to be called to have meekness and gentleness and bearing one another in love. Yeah, you're going to be called into a deeper realm of patience. Yep, that's all a part of it. You don't get to sidestep those pieces and your vocation. And I'm saying this again. I'm saying this again because I really want you to understand, in your vocation, you dare not you dare not fail to be who you're called to be because they didn't give you a title, because they're not the ones who predestined you. They're not the ones who called and affirmed you. That was God's doing. So if he has called you as such, you respond to that and you operate in that call. You don't have to be named the chief intercessor to pray for someone in need. You don't have to be the pastor to be able to articulate or maybe explain a text that someone's having a hard time understanding. You don't have to be the lead singer to be able to minister in song if somebody just needs a melody to soothe their soul. If that is your vocation, if that is your gifting, you walk in that, because you're not doing it for man's approval anyway. You're doing it that God would be affirmed and approved through what he's doing in you. Gone are the days of the excuses that we allow ourselves to yield so that we don't have to be who we're called to be, because they don't call me that. We can't do that anymore. And I know it's easy to do that because you're like, well, they don't call me that, so there's no space for me to operate in that capacity in this setting. Oh, well, there will be space made for you, and there will be a mandate for you to be who you're called to be. You may not be in the setting that you're going to walk in, but while you're in the setting, continue to perfect and grow in your gifting, because where you are might be the training ground for where you're going. But if you never start to exercise in the gifting, you can't be sent. You can't be sent until you've studied to show yourself approved. So please, don't use that as an excuse. And I'm saying that because I've used it as an excuse. Okay, I'm not exempt. I've said, well, they don't call me that, so I'm not going to do that. Or I haven't been ordained to do that, so I'm not going to do that. Now, am I negating the importance of being ordained and licensed and affirmed by leadership? No, I think it is a definite need, and it should always happen. But what I am saying is we cannot use the lack of that happening we can't use that as the excuses why we don't do what we know God has called us to do. That won't work. That won't work. Because where you are called, you will be utilized. God will continue to affirm, and the opportunity to operate in who he's called you to be will always present itself. But you've got to grow in the gifting. And so maybe some of us don't know what we're called to do, and maybe we don't know what our giftings are. And this is when we go into prayer and we really ask God to reveal it to us. Okay? And don't expect this grand, elaborate smoke from heaven to be like, you have been called to be. Like, he's not coming down that way, right? But he will come to you in a way in which you understand. And you may often find that you're doing a lot of what you've already been called and purposed to do in your day-to-day life. That's why I'm saying don't negate your vocation. Okay? Because it's not always what you're doing in the pulpit. It could be what you're doing in your day-to-day life. And when you feel a pull for that and there's a passion for that and you can never walk away from it, dig into that, lean into that, and find out, is there something more that I'm supposed to be doing with this? Is there a reason why I can't let this go? Ask God to reveal it to you and explain it to you. And then get around some people that can help you cultivate your gifting. See, you should be surrounded by some people who see who you're called to be. And I've learned that most time people see who you are even before you recognize it. Like, you'll notice that there are people who say, are you sure you shouldn't be doing, or should you be considering? And they see these things in you, but you're like, definitely not me. I'm not qualified for such. But don't just brush that off. Lean into that, because there may be some people who see in you and have been sent to affirm in you what you've yet to walk in. Don't run away from those people. Pull them closer. Pull them into you. And then ask God to surround you with people that can continue to help you grow and cultivate in the call. And then get up under some good leadership, okay? Get up under some good leadership. Your leader should always be affirming who you are through the word. You know you're in the right house when the word goes forth and it speaks readily to your situation. There should always be a word that goes forth in the house that you sit in and are a student of, that continues to cultivate and groom and prick you and have you dig deeper into the call. There should be. So don't just walk away from it, and don't just leave because it's not your time yet and you haven't been put on the platform you feel like you're supposed to be put on. Because you're gonna start all the way over wherever you go. So learn to be patient, and while being patient, continue to groom and grow. And I'm telling you this because I've had to live it. I've had to walk through it. I'm walking through it even now. My life is no cakewalk at all. I ask God, why does it have to be so lonely? Why do I feel like I go in cycles with things and then I've got to be pulled out of this and go into the next thing? Why do I feel like I can't just be in a stable environment? Like, why do you continue to pull me into obscurity? But that's part of my call, because I have to be a consecrated person before him so that he can speak and give instruction, because the instruction that he gives me is life and death to those that I have to speak it to. And I understand that. Is it fun all the time? No. Do I want to do it all the time? Mm-mm. But is that who I'm called to be? Yes. And I would rather live a purpose-filled life than to negate it because it's not comfortable and it's not what I prefer. That's just not how it works. Okay? So I want to leave you with this journal prompt. And then I really want you guys to get around some people that can help you walk through this, because it's not easy. But for your journal prompt tonight, I want you to ask yourself, am I doing what I know to do? Or am I fulfilling what I'm called to do? And really, really think about that. Are you doing what you know to do because it's familiar? You've done it for so long, you can do it in your sleep, so it doesn't really require much. Or are you doing what you are called to do? Are we? Life coaching. I hear you. I hear you. So think about that. Are we doing it? Are we doing what we're comfortable with? Or are we doing what God called us to be? Or called us to do, I'm sorry. Think about that. I really want you guys to spend some time. And don't just write it and walk away from it. Because if you find yourself on the side saying, I'm doing what I know to do, are you ready to migrate to the other side and live the life that you're purposed to do? And if so, start asking God for your support in your tribe. He answers prayer. He said we have not because we ask not. So ask him, okay? So if you're calling me to this, can you please put me in the company of those that you have put in my path to help me cultivate this? Because I'm going to need help. And don't be ashamed or embarrassed to ask for help. Because when the name change happens, you take on an identity that you're not familiar with, and so you're going to need help along the way because you don't know everything, and that's okay. And please be gracious with yourself in that. Please don't expect to just walk into the call and already be preaching to the masses or singing to millions, because it doesn't work like that. Or having a nonprofit that's fully funded or whatever. It doesn't work like that. Even in accepting the call, there's a process associated with that, and you've got to be able to yield to that as well, okay? So ask yourself that question, if you would, and really take some time and dig into it and walk through it. For those who are watching online, I do apologize for the technical difficulties. I will fix this, and we will upload the full episode on our YouTube channel where you can catch it without the glitches. Again, I apologize, but it's clear that this message needed to go out because I've never seen that happen so many times while we were online tonight. But please, you guys, the called life is not the easy life, but it is the purposeful life. It is a life that you've been called to live. It is a life that you've been graced to live. And whatever you do, do not turn away from it, because you've got to sacrifice something. The sacrifice, I promise you, will definitely be well worth it. Just before we jump off the line, I want to let you guys know that I have an upcoming engagement that I've been asked to be a part of, which I'm very excited about. I will be a panelist at the Thrives Women's Leadership Conference, and their theme this year is called The Evolution of the Female Leader. I'm so excited to be able to sit amongst who I think are giants in their arenas, women who are very knowledgeable, and they pour and they pour, and you want to get there. The event will be taking place in Houston, Texas, September 7th. I have the flyer posted on www.brunchofgirls.org. It is also posted on all of my social media handles. The host for that event is Madam Sheikah Petaway, and I'm very excited to be able to be amongst the women that are going to be speaking on the panel alongside me. I never take it for granted that God opens the door. When he does, I will always say thank you, because he's such a gentleman, and he doesn't have to open the doors for me, but he does. And so I'm praying that you guys will come out and support. I think it'll be a great opportunity. Registration is $40. Again, the event is taking place on September 7th, 2019 here in Houston, Texas. Come out and join me. Again, the conference title is The Evolution of the Female Leader. Okay, so if you are a woman, and you are a leader, and it doesn't matter what type of leader, if you are leading in any way, you want to be there. This is going to be a conference that's going to be enriching, and it's going to be fulfilling, and it'll get you around the company of some other people who are doing what you're doing, because you need community, right? Right. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in this evening. Again, we'll get this uploaded on YouTube so that you can get the full show, and it'll be within the next few days or so. Okay, thank you guys. Have a good night. Bye-bye.